They say Columbus discovered America, but let's get real. Columbus didn't discover a damn thing. Land was lived on, loved, documented in soil. If Columbus was the first, then why did archaeologists find African tools, African cotton, and even African plants in Mexico before he was even born? And let's not forget those colossal Olmec heads. Massive stone sculptures with unmistakable West African features. Full lips, broad noses, strong cheekbones. That's not coincidence. That's a carving. That's identity set in stone. Now let's talk about Mali. In the 1300s, Mali wasn't just a kingdom, it was a superpower. One of the richest empires the world had ever seen. And at its head stood a man named King Abu Bakr II. He wasn't some myth. He's documented in Arabic sources, mentioned by the great historian Al-Umari, who said Abu Bakr abdicated the throne to explore the edge of the Atlantic. This wasn't just a royal whim. This was a full-blown expedition. 2. 0 ships. 1. 0 for crew. 1. 0 for supplies. That's not random. That's infrastructure. That's logistics. That's planning on an empire level. He left with an entire fleet and never returned. So what did he find? According to Dr. Clyde Winters, a leading Afrocentric historian, there is strong evidence that West African Mandinka speakers reached the Americas, bringing linguistic influences that show up in Native American languages. Some words in the languages of the Olmec, and even early Mayan structures, hint at African etymology. But the evidence isn't just linguistic. It's botanical. How did African crops like the bottle gourd and yam get to the Americas pre-Columbus? Genetic studies show the presence of African DNA in South American plant strains plants that were cultivated long before Europeans arrived. Then, there's metallurgy. Certain techniques found in pre-Columbian metalwork closely resemble West African iron forging traditions. And what about the oral traditions? Tribes in West Africa, like the Dogon, tell stories of early voyages to a distant western land across the sea. This wasn't fantasy. This was memory. Meanwhile, Spanish accounts from the 1500s mention seeing dark-skinned people in the Caribbean and Central America who were not enslaved Africans. These weren't victims of the Middle Passage, they were already there. So let's be clear. If Africans were already here, that means the narrative we've been fed, Europe as the brave explorer, Africa as the backwater collapses, that narrative wasn't created to inform you. It was crafted to control you. If you're told your ancestors were nothing but cargo, you won't ask questions. But if you knew you came from ocean navigators, engineers, astronomers, then the whole game changes. Suddenly, black people are seen not as the conquered, but as the original travelers. And you know what? That terrifies the world. It terrifies the institutions built on the idea that African brilliance started with slavery and ends in protest. It terrifies the systems that profit from your disconnection to your past. But guess what? The truth is leaking. The evidence is everywhere. In the soil, in the stones, in the sea routes, in the DNA. You can try to bury a king, but you can't bury his legacy. And you can't erase a people whose fingerprints are still pressed into the foundations of the world. So next time they say Columbus discovered America, ask them first to do what? First to draw a map? Or first to ignore the footprints already in the sand? Because this isn't just about history. It's about pride. It's about knowing who you are. And when you know who you are, no one can lie to you about who you've been. Because once you understand that Africans were here first, the dominoes start falling. If Africans crossed the Atlantic centuries before Columbus, then what else have they lied about? What else have they buried beneath museum floors and textbook lines? The truth is, Africa was never behind. We were ahead. From astronomy to engineering, Africans weren't just building pyramids, we were building trade routes, calendars, and philosophies long before the Renaissance ever lit a candle in Europe. Mali, Ghana, Songhai, these weren't just kingdoms, they were global players. And if King Abu Bakr II made it to the Americas, that means we were part of that global conversation long before Europe even knew the Americas existed. That changes everything. It means the African presence in the Americas wasn't a fluke, it was intentional, strategic, civilized, and the implications go deep. Because if African knowledge shaped parts of pre-Columbian America, then African people helped lay the foundation of what would one day become the Western world, and they've been hiding that. Think about the psychological impact of telling a people their history starts with chains. Now, think about the power of telling them it started with sails. That's why the Olmec heads matter. That's why the tools and crops and carbon-dated African DNA in American soil matter. That's why even the early Portuguese and Spanish explorers wrote accounts of meeting black natives, because history leaves clues even when people try to erase the trail. But we have to ask, why was this story buried? Because if the world accepted that Africa once led global exploration, it would have to answer for how that leadership was stripped. It would have to reckon with colonization, slavery, and racism, not as random horrors but as deliberate strategies to interrupt a legacy. And that kind of truth is dangerous. That kind of truth gives you pride. That kind of truth gives you direction. So they rewrote the narrative. They called Columbus a discoverer, even though he got lost and thought he landed in India. They gave him holidays and statues while stripping Africans of names, cultures, and contributions. But here's what they didn't expect. They didn't expect us to start asking questions. They didn't expect the rise of independent historians, archaeologists, and digital creators who put these puzzle pieces back together. And they definitely didn't expect you right now watching this video, feeling that fire in your chest that comes from truth unburied. This is bigger than Columbus. This is about who gets remembered and who gets erased, who gets credited and who gets covered up. And once you realize that the real explorers, the real builders, the real blueprint holders looked like you, everything changes. Because suddenly, the lie doesn't hold up. Suddenly, the shame doesn't stick. And suddenly, you start to see yourself not as a remnant of oppression but as a remnant of royalty, as the legacy of navigators who faced the Atlantic with nothing but vision, courage, and the will to move history forward.